think, we can brainstorm.
Yeah.
You can tell us what your, constraints and boundary conditions are regarding the course that you've been, you're planning to float. What are the objectives that you want to meet?
Sure.
So,
Sure.
you know, and you know, a potential list of topics from your side will also be helpful. Then we can
Yeah.
try and,
You
work around,
you can add and subtract that things. No problem for that.
right? We can
Ma'am,
add it.
yeah, yeah. It's now 4 p.m. Hopefully, Ankit, it will live now.
Yeah, 2 minutes बाकी है.
अच्छा, उसको दिखा रहा था. अच्छा, ma'am, we are live now.
We live, okay.
No problem for that.
No problem.
नमस्कार सभी पार्टिसिपेंट्स को और हमारी रिस्पेक्टेड मैम डॉक्टर अजंता सिंह फ्रॉम नानयांग यूनिवर्सिटी सिंगापुर एंड आईडीसी आईआईटी बॉम्बे से आप सभी को नमस्कार है. उम्मीद करता हूं कि सभी लोग इस महामारी के दौर में स्वस्थ और सुरक्षित होंगे. अपना ध्यान रखिए. मेरे पास आज कुछ बच्चों की सजेशंस और रिक्वेस्ट आए थे कि बंगाल और उड़ीसा की तरफ साइक्लोन आने वाला है, तो थोड़ी सी कुछ प्रॉब्लम है. तो मैंने सभी को कहा है कि किसी भी तरीके के आप परेशानी मत लीजिए. इस कोर्स से रिलेटेड लेक्चर्स यूट्यूब पे अवेलेबल है. असाइनमेंट्स जब आप फ्री होइएगा तब अपने आराम से जमा कर दीजिए. तो बहुत हार्ड एंड फास्ट नहीं है कि आपको इतना ही समय करना है. पहले आप सबको सुरक्षित रहना बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी है.
Exactly. और
जैसा कि
एक बात मैं बताना चाहती हूँ कि ये साइक्लोन के वजह जिनका मिस हो गए, तो वो नेक्स्ट साइकिल में भी आ सकते हैं.
हाँ, वो भी आ सकते हैं, लेकिन अगर कोई 1-2 दिन आगे पीछे हो रहा है तो उसकी कोई
प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. राइट.
और जैसा कि हम लोग इस कोर्स को कर रहे हैं, फंडामेंटल ऑफ सोशल डिजाइन कोर्स, जो बनारस हिंदू यूनिवर्सिटी, मैरीलैंड इंस्टीट्यूट कॉलेज ऑफ आर्ट और मिशिगन स्टेट यूनिवर्सिटी के साथ ज्वाइंट प्रोजेक्ट में चल रहा है. इसकी इस पार्क स्कीम के तहत जो मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एजुकेशन की है, इसमें हम लोग सोशल डिजाइन के रिलेवेंस में चीजों को पढ़ रहे हैं. और जैसा पिछली 3-4 क्लासेस में आप लोगों ने देखा है, पढ़ा है और सुना समझा और साथ में असाइनमेंट जमा किए हैं कि डिजाइन के जो एक बेसिक इंफॉर्मेशन से लेके एडवांस लेवल पे कैसे हम चीजों को पढ़ते हैं. तो इस लेवल पे आज हम सेकेंड मॉड्यूल की ओर बढ़ रहे हैं, जो कि एक तरीके से डिजाइन के पैराडाइम को शिफ्ट करने पे फोकस करेगा. और इस नजरिए पे डिजाइन में क्या क्या किस तरीके के चेंजेस आ रहे हैं. इसके बाद जो डिजाइन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, स्पेशली जो डिजाइन इंस्टीट्यूट्स हैं, वो किस तरीके से इसमें रोल प्ले कर रहे हैं. अगर कोई गाइडलाइन बनती है, कोई मैनिफेस्टोज बनते हैं, तो इन सारी चीजों पे हम लोग इस 2 दिन के दौरान बात करेंगे. एक क्लास आज होगी और एक क्लास डे आफ्टर टुमारो, मतलब थर्सडे को होगी शाम 4 बजे. तो आज मैं अजंता मैम का पुनः फिर से स्वागत करता हूं और मैम से रिक्वेस्ट करता हूं कि मैम आज की क्लास शुरू करें. थैंक यू मैम.
Thank you, Manish, for conducting this and getting everybody together. I would like to start by saying that I greatly appreciate the efforts of Professor Manish Arora and his team in being able to introduce the word provocation, which I think is very, very important when one is trying to put forth sets of ideas drawn from various disciplines in a very critical thinking manner. We're not talking at the surface level. We are trying to go into various, disciplinary threads to see how we may enrich our thought process here. So, the title of the talk is Provocations, Approaches. My thing hasn't come yet. Provocations, Approaches, Paradigms of Design. This is first of 3 series. So today we will do provocations, which is a very unusual and very interesting word to use, because if a thought process is interesting, it is interesting because you feel provoked. You feel, either way, you feel like you've agreed, or you feel like you kind of agree, but that's not your way of thinking, or you feel that you disagree, wish it was something else, or you feel that in future you would like to follow this train of thought, etc., etc. So at that level, you're really actually churning your ideas around, and learning is not just about listening and going back, passive. It's through provocations that you actually churn the idea in your head and you bring forth your own questions. So now, uh, we will raise important questions here based on the two sessions of evolution of design that we have done. As you know, we covered a phenomenal period of time, the design story across 150,000 years, which is normally never done. And we have done this by presenting three watershed moments, actually, two very important watershed moments. The third one will come along the way. So the first one being the cognitive revolution between 150,000 to 70,000 years, and the second one being the industrial revolution about 500 years ago. Actually, it's about 300 to 400 years ago, but if you take the scientific revolution, which nurtured the industrial revolution, then it's definitely about 500 years ago. Up until the industrial revolution, reality was considered to be immutable, not changeable, because reality was what was laid down by nature, and nature's larger plan never changes. You have sunrise to sunset, you have the seasons, you have all of that. That is almost immutable reality. However, at some point in time, mankind managed to develop strands of technology and build cognitive skills, came up with phenomenal set of innovations, so phenomenal that they have lasted this long. And there's an American thinker who says that actually man's landing on the moon carries traces of the cognitive skills that were developed 150 to 70,000 years ago. Uh, with the onset of the Industrial Revolution, a series of movements came in. We've discussed them, and today we discussed them up to the present, and today we will raise questions about these movements. Now, the like I said, the credit for raising a section called Provocation goes to the university, to the organizers, to Professor Arora and his colleagues. And like I also said, that provocations help reassess the information that you received, and the information that I have put together. It helps me also reassess if I'm going in the right direction, or if I would like to make it less provocative, more provocative, etc., etc. But in any case, the provocations, the set of provocations, and the underlying questions uh, focus on one central theme, and to understand all of the design evolution milestones that we have looked at. Do they defy the idea of social design, resist the idea of social design, or do they move seamlessly into the idea of social design? So the important question, the first very important question regarding the evolution of design across time, it reminds us. Uh, since I've done a recap, let me also once again present the definition of design for you. It may be defined as the human capacity to shape and make our own environments and ways, and in different ways. They could be built environment, they could be visual environment, they could be tangible embodied products that can serve our needs and give meaning to our lives. And we may safely assume that design has been at work since the arrival of the earliest humans, through three strands of intelligence: technical intelligence, which helped him to build tools; environmental intelligence, that helped him to sense his environment for reasons of survival, and basically the lay of the land; and social intelligence, which helped him to learn social skills and form groupings, and carry out daily activities in a way that was harmonious to the household as well as the community. safe. It was when these initially the three strands of seamlessly between the three forms of intelligence. And when that happened, is when the cognitive revolution happened, and that helped us innovate and come up with all kinds of inventions that led to problem solving and design solutions. Now, even though this happened over a very long period of time, phenomenally long period of time, the breakthroughs maybe, we have realized that the breakthroughs that happened that gave us our innovations may be seen as uh, two systems of breakthroughs under two systems. One was under the period of cognitive revolution, and one was under the period of industrial revolution. And like I mentioned last time, the dramatic part of it being that there are very, very large swathes of land across the world that that remain uncovered by the industrial revolution, which goes back to 500 years ago. And so, therefore, the traces of cognitive revolution remain untouched in many parts of the world. And we do know that these sensibilities actually coexist because the fruits of the cognitive revolution remained so long with us that they're actually in our DNA. And even if we want to adopt the practices of industrial revolution, we will always do it with some amount of reservation, trying to gauge it vis-a-vis the system that we already have, which is actually a really good thing. Now, because there is such a lot of information across this huge period of time, and because we want to constantly retain the big picture to be able to analyze what happened across these two contrasting periods, there is a methodology adopted a lot of times in anthropology and also in the sciences. It's called reductionism. Reductionism was used beautifully by anthropologists, French anthropologist and structuralist Claude Lévi-Strauss, especially for his work in Brazil, where he tried to understand the food practices of the Amazonians. And because it was all very unknown to him, he stayed there for a while. He tried to understand, and then and what he did was, in order for him to understand it better, he pitted it against what it was in his own land, which is something that a lot of anthropologists have not done. He was one of the first ones to actually do it. And I find that to be a very, very convenient tool to take large amounts of information from contrasting systems and place them side by side to understand what contrasts with the other or what compares with the other. That is the methodology we will use today to understand uh, how the two systems stand up, because they have developed their own sets of dynamics. um, we'll try to understand the implications for social design that the dynamics of these systems have posed for us. We already know what they are. We will now go over them through a set of questions. The first question that we will ask here is: in what ways and under what circumstances did the world get split into such distinct, contrasting situations that that amounted to a complete split in our ways of thinking, in our outlook to life, and the ways of thinking qualifying as worldview. So the ways of thinking or our worldviews going in two different directions in terms of our notions of community. So was it the way time as a factor, samay, time as a factor was applied, and was time as a factor applied differentially? That means time being viewed in one way and applied in one way in one system, and in a completely different way in another. And that is very hard to understand because you feel that time is a universal concept. It runs in seconds, minutes, and hours, and days run into weeks, and weeks run into fortnights, and fortnights run into months, and months run into years. So how can it be different? How can you apply time differently? And that is what we're going to try to understand. How can you apply? How does time apply itself differently uh, in as cultural types? So you have one cultural type of time in one system and another cultural type of time in another. Therefore, the question arises is, does time need to be understood as distinct cultural types and not as a universal construct? And why, if time as an entity was to be instrumental in causing a split between the cultures, then why is time not analyzed enough? And does our analysis of design under the two sets of revolution merit time to be seen as distinct cultural practices, which means that time could be seen as two models, one as slow time and one as fast time, which means that you have slow time practices and you have fast time practices. Next slide. All right. So here we come in to show you time as a driver for cultural types, where uh, where we ask the question: are many of the other contrasting cultural entities attributed under the two models molded by time, and are there direct consequences of the differential ways of applying time across the two systems? So let's look at some of the causal factors that may actually end up distinguishing time as entities one from the other. So it's like if you were to give name to time. So time has two different names. Time has there is a Manish on one side, which Manish represents the time that we have attributed to, let's say, the cognitive revolution model. And then there is, let's say, Pratish, who represents the other one. And there are two different personas with their own experiences, their own worldviews, and everything. So I'm just trying to personify to show you that time is almost like a person, and it follows its own DNA, and you have to treat it very carefully to understand how it will interact with you. So let's look at some of the causal factors that may have actually split time into two different cultural types. The first of all, so on the left you will find the attributes that I have applied to the cognitive revolution model. On the right, it is the attribute for the industrial revolution model. Like I mentioned last time, in the cognitive revolution time space, the space where cognitive revolution remains in the DNA of its people, those people in many ways continue to follow the daily circadian rhythm. The daily circadian rhythm is the biological natural rhythm where the sun rises and the sun sets, and between sunrise and sunset a lot of things that happen that you want to finish and then slowly phase out the day. There is absolutely no question of extending your activities beyond sunset, except for maybe complete your meal and have a small chat, and then you go to sleep and you get up early. And you also know that in our culture we have something called the Brahma Muhurtam, which is they say the ideal time to wake up. Yoga and Ayurveda describe Brahma Muhurtam, and they say that the body clock actually moves in that cycle. If I had the time, I would have, I would have loved to have shown you how the anatomy of time and the anatomy of the human system were actually mapped onto each other in our early treatise, and they were actually able to come up with advanced, medicinal systems on account of that. So we also know that uh, the sun has its own orbital movement. So the sun, does not rise at the precise same time every day. It shifts by minutes, almost into more than half an hour sometimes. It also accordingly sets. So we are not expecting to look at precise time. We look at approximate time measures. Okay, so as against the daily circadian time on the industrial model, the moment the machines came in, and I mentioned last time, the machine had to be kept running constantly. And so you had to split the circadian time into three shifts of 8 hours each, because that's what the machine demanded. And even though it went against the biological requirements of the human body, it was still applied. And I know that in one of my stays at the this is the Edward James Foundation, where I've gone there from time to time. I know that one night I was taking a walk. It was quite late, and the night security, who said that, "Ma'am, I'm not going to be coming for the next 2 days. So are you still here? If not, then I will wish you goodbye." So I said, "Okay, what happened? Are you taking leave?" He said, "No. When we do the night shift for a week, we are given off 2 days to adjust our body clock, and then for us to come back to get into the next shift." That has not happened here. I've not seen that happen in most of the situations in India, but that is an acknowledgement that the industrial time in 8 hour shifts is not meant for your biological cycle. uh, y- and since it's split up into 8 hour units, you have to also keep precise time is measured in very, very precise units, because we looked at time in an approximate way. And we have the word करीब, अब तो करीब करीब इतना समय है, अच्छा ठीक है, करीब करीब हम निकलने जा रहे हैं. This is the way we speak. And if you try to get too specific, people think you're rude. Whereas in the West, it is culturally correct to be precise. And even if you do not have a reason to be so precise, but if you've given your word that you will be at a certain place at a certain time, you will have to be there. So it's become part of their cultural makeup. Precise time is everything for them. They get upset if you don't keep time. We did not have something called clocks in our culture. We had other devices. We had, for example, the sundial. This is beautiful sundial in Jaipur. We had devices like that, but the actual, mechanical device of a clock actually came with the Industrial Revolution, more or less. And it was a necessity under that system, because you had to go by the second. Every second had to be recorded. Our calendars, that is, our timetables, have been the lunar and the solar calendar. We follow our harvest according to the solar calendar, and we follow all our festivals according to lunar calendar. Whereas we have the Gregorian artificial annual calendar in the West. It's artificially constructed. It's a Gregorian time from January to December, and it is not connected to the seasonal cycles at all. So you do not, under the Gregorian cycle, your summer solstices and autumn solstices will come middle, in odd hours, at odd times, whereas our timetables start with sun movements, moon movements. So we have Akshay Tritiya, we have all of this. So you can measure time and you can say 15 days from now, this is going to happen. 1 month from now, that is going to happen, and so on. Uh, we also look at plant, the growth of plant as a form of timetable. None such exists in the West, because most of their plant growing is actually artificially done, and they can practically grow anything at any point in time. They do not go by the seasons necessarily. If there's a big demand for mushrooms, they will grow it all year round. Whereas we say season के खाना खाओ तो तबीयत ठीक रहती है. Slow seasonal picture of time, and not this, this whole approximation of time that took you through the day, because your work also was set in a way where between so much time and so much time you would more or less complete it. Then when the shadow, looking at the sun's shadow, etc., you would adjudge and you would complete your day's work. Whereas in the West, everything needs to be done in with a sense of immediacy, and therefore it's called fast time. Fast time comes from the immediacy of the clock ticking. You know, the seconds just ticking. You can hear the second ticking. That's an unnatural sound. It's not there in nature. Whereas slow seasonal picture of time is where you let time flow. Time is also time is not connected to the value of time in these cultures was not by the amount of money you made. It was in terms of the kind of social time you spent with people. Whereas in the West, like they say, time is of the essence. So uh, these differences in time continue to exist in our culture. So we are not we're often teased that Indians are, it's called Indian Standard Time, because we are not really good at keeping time. That is because our sense of time is aligned with the seasons, with the sense of social time. And the sense of social time, if I have to mention this, no matter how advanced we become industrially, the sense of social time is never going to go. So the student will land up. So in the West, at a design school or at any other school, you have to take an appointment from your professor if you want to meet the professor. If you have not kept your appointment, the appointment is gone. And with great difficulty, you will get another one. Whereas over here, the student will just land up and say, sir, sir, and you'll probably bump into him at the stairways or something and say, sir, sir, or ma'am, can I have, I just need 2 minutes of your time. There is no concept of 2 minutes. He's going to come and sit and he's going to take up half an hour of my time. But, you'll just show your hand and say, I just need 2 minutes. So what can you do? These are our cultural practices, okay? And it also has its merit, because it is also it is a very sobering way of looking at time. You don't have to get hyper about time in our culture. Now, the consequence of this differential time application, let's look at. So far I've looked at the conditions that characterize time. Let's look at the consequences of this kind of time. First, it has affected the product making ecology of the industrial cultures, because earlier on, under the circadian time model, or farmers or craftsmen, artisans would know how to do all the functions within a given product making, whether it was about growing a certain crop, or knitting a godri from beginning to end, or stitching a pair of shoes, or making a terracotta water carrier. The person who did would do it. There would be a community of people doing it, and they would all be quite adept at the different parts of the system and the process. In the industrial system, the entire industrial process is broken up into division of labor. And the term division of labor was actually given to it by Engels, Marx and Engels, under the Marxist system, where each worker uh, was given a sub part of the entire product making. And that worker had to do only that part, day after day after day after day after day, to the point of boredom, and beyond that, what Marxists call to the point of alienation, where you no longer feel like doing it. You feel angry and you feel angry, you feel upset with the workplace and with the machine, and you're not a very happy person to be sitting and working there. And also, your workspace is very constrained, because you can't really move out. You have to take permission from the supervisor to go to the bathroom. You have to do things like that. Whereas in a product ecology space, you have a happy space where you adjudge what needs to be done, and then you form a community of people, and through an interaction with them, the product gets done. Now, you know that saris. these beautiful saris from Assam and Benares that are woven sometimes take 3 to 4 months. And the process is known to the master craftsman, who shares it in his own way, which I talked about, Shilpi, Shilpan, and Shilpa. And it is actually then shared, and the apprentice learns what to do. He or she's not as good as the master is, but in time, the apprentice actually picks up the whole thing. Now, in the industrial system, so that means that if, let's say, within that system of master apprentice, somebody has fallen ill, uh, the work need not stop. Someone else will step in and, do it to some extent at least. Whereas in the industrial process, if a set of people who are supposed to do a particular set of work uh, have not come, the work after that have to be stopped, actually, have to literally be stopped. And therefore, so this is called the factory assembly line. It's all very mechanized, and it all moves very systematically from one to the other. And that is why it is possible also for workers in that system. First of all, workers feel highly alienated. Charlie Chaplin made a film called Modern Times where he parodied this. And it's a very sad thing to see people sitting there like robots, doing work and just waiting for the bell to go so that they can run home. There is no identification with the work you're doing. There's no pride of product. Okay. uh, so the factory assembly line system is also such that you can threaten your employers with striking work. That means that you strike work and you move out, and the factory can do nothing about it except to negotiate and bring back the workers. So the entire chain of activity can be stopped and a month called, and that would cause fairly irretrievable damage to the system. The second consequence of this breaking up of time into shifts was that this template of time of 3 shift time was actually applied to all other institutions. School timings started following this. Shop timings started following this. So all other institutions within that system had to then take on this template. So you find children running to school, mothers, if it's a working mother, then within that household, the father getting ready, mother getting ready, children getting ready, this insane amount of activity going on. And it's maddening, absolutely. And it's a very unnatural situation, if you ask me. Whereas that is the other consequence. The third consequence was that there was because earlier on under the earlier system, you had your work and living residency within the same area, within the same village or within the same district. uh, and that is something that Gandhi had actually espoused, because he said that if you build the village ecology, within that, your economic system, your all other, your craft system, etc., can be protected, can be made self sufficient. And of course, he espoused the idea of non industrial, and that was not a very workable proposition. But like I mentioned, Charles Eames, he had come and said that if you can actually take that kind of a model, but also combine craft with industrial processes, then you will be a real winner of a culture. So we today we are beginning to understand how that may actually be done, because we have technologies through which you can connect people remotely and you can actually work collaboratively. So we are actually at an advantage today, to in terms of combining the best of both the worlds. That is, if a particular culture has retained its DNA of the cognitive revolution model, and if a culture has been in a hurry to give it up, then there's nothing to be done. Singapore, for example, it's another Western culture. I've lived there for years. Everything is by time. So and yet there are underlying cultural nuances also there. Now, when the concept of local is gone, where you have to leave home and commute to reach your workplace, and then you have to commute to come back, your time after work time reduces considerably, and you're also very tired. Your children are tired, your spouse is tired, and so the community time that is left is actually very little. It's also very stressful. So the when the concept of local is gone, the conveniences of community are also, in some sense, shattered. I would also like to say that at this point in time, because families had to seek jobs outside, a lot of times family members had to disperse. Like if you look at a modern family system in India, uh, the within a family, children have gone to other states, to other cities, sometimes to other countries to study, never to come back. Sometimes the parents are there alone, and I know when my father, elderly father, was very elderly, he'd fallen ill, and the doctors had said that we have a lot of patients who call up from abroad, and we are actually remote caretaking patients in ICU. So imagine what a it's inhumane situation, that is that your caregiver is no longer with you, because the nuclear family, the joint family, the extended family is broken up into nuclear family. So earlier, when we had parallel sets of parents and we said bari ma, choti ma, all that is gone. Now you're completely dependent on one set of parents. God forbid something happens, the family itself goes to seed sometimes. It also means that another consequence in terms of community breakdown can be seen in the form of the I call it the anatomy of a disintegrated community. And certainly when you look at the functions of the anatomy of a disintegrated community, none of it is actually an exaggeration. So the like I said, the unity of place of living and place of work is destroyed. The community of so there is separation. Here there was unity, there in the industrial system there is separation. Here you have community time and functions as a seamless entity. So you finish work and then you sit down to chat, and then you discuss each other's problems, and then you try to help each other out. There is no such scope in the industrial system because of commuting and all the the alienation from work. The person is already quite upset and angry and tired, and there's not enough support structure at home to make him or her feel better. So you also have very high levels of depression now that doctors are trying to attend to, etc. So there is reduced community time. There is hugely reduced community time. Then also community as the larger caretaker, as a joint family, where your own family is a mere sub entity of the larger family, and you, like I said, you had more than one parents, more than one everybody, including people to take care of the household. And in a nuclear family, that is simply not possible. Uh, this is an important part of the anatomy, that when you're in a community, ecological community structure, your allegiance is to the community, kinship, biradari. You when you even when you leave the village and you go somewhere else, you say, like, you get married, you say, I belong to so and so kin. Kin and kith take on a different meaning altogether. You will all annually always visit them, you will always take gifts for them, you will make sure to visit, etc. But the allegiance, when the family breaks down, becomes nuclear, and anyway the nuclear family itself disperses. The allegiance, your allegiance as a market centric in a market centric design paradigm, and we're going to talk about it in our next, is your allegiance, your loyalty then shifts to the market and consumerism. So it's everything revolves around what shall I buy for Valentine's Day, what shall I buy for Mother's Day. It is very ironical that you will not go to meet your mother, but you will send an expensive gift to your mother. And those are the sad ironies of this kind of time systems. And lastly, I would say that the pursuit of the pursuits that you may the social pursuits that you may actually create and experience would be quite different in the two systems, under the two systems. In the culturally mediated system, there would be enough time and there would be enough people to sit and gather around, tell you stories, update you on different things. There would be so there would you would also be you'll have the time to celebrate festivals, enriched social experiences. It also means that if there is death or mourning within a family, there's an extended community set up to actually give you time, give you company. Whereas in the other system, you're pretty much left alone. You do know that in Western countries, when a woman is pregnant, she alone goes to the welcome home, and within the other system, the moment the baby is there, and there are so many rituals surrounding all of these markers of joyful rituals surrounding all of these markers of the girl's pregnancy, right into childbirth, right into the baby growing up, etc., etc. The cycles of consumeristic agencies, you're not really happy because you feel somebody else is having a better time, so you will indulge in it in cycles upon cycles, never knowing if it is enough. And lastly, of course, the social spaces in this kind of time model, in the cognitive time model, remains a continuum in terms of social design needs activities, and the other one it is almost social design, which means that the need for if the social spaces are not there, you feel that you're not really talking about social design. And when I started my presentation, day one, I'd said that at some point I will ask, do I talk about social design or do I talk about social design? In which category are you? You will slowly realize for yourself. So let's go to the where I start with. I will now take you as a kind of test of what I've said. Uh, so this is the rough model of what Noah Hariri calls pre-modern cycle, but I would call it the cognitive cycle. And you have the so-called modern cycle on the other hand, which is guided by the the Gregorian time calendar, and you see the circles reversed. So here you have strong family and community, over there you have weak family and community. Here you have weak state and market, basically weak market, and over there you have strong market. Here you have weak individuals, over there you have strong individuals. So in a social design community space, it's not very you have arranged marriages. It's not very easy to go and declare, I want to marry so and so, because they will ask, what family is the boy from? Does that match with your our family system? And we say that our marriage is actually not just a marriage between two individuals, it's a marriage between two families and two sets of kin. So let me now take you through a set of um, uh, proof of concept, so to say. Uh, and of course, I would like to add a very intriguing question to this. And for me, that is in some sense the most defining question, which is amidst the wave of discovery that most innovations and designs from the pre-industrial revolution era were built with purposes that also encoded everyday life, etc., and where we built a lot of products which we not only added we to which not only had functional value, but they were also symbolic value. So for example, you have products like the Purna Kalash. You have rice strands, the fronds of rice that you keep after the first harvest, to keep it almost for the whole year, and so on. uh, so these were actually shaped by intuition in addition to material knowledge. And I will give you examples of a fantastic example that Charles Eames had raised when he had come to India. It will come after this. So we not only have material knowledge with which to make products, but we also did it with a certain amount of intuition, and we did it with a certain amount of symbolic, metaphysical. purpose, not just the physical purpose. It wasn't, like a pot was not just a pot. A pot was something that, let's say, my mother had given to me as part of my trousseau, and then I say I'll use it, and then when I have a daughter, I will pass it on to her. When she gets married, so the pot gets invested with all these kind of values which are actually almost unexplainable. But when the daughter gets the pot, then she will take it with her and she will invest it with her own set of emotions, and it will go on. So the question here is that, since this should we then ask, since this period, that is the cognitive period, sowed the seeds of social and spawned the idea of collective and community, should we therefore ask, is there a relationship between intuition and social? And by extension of that logic, is there a connection between the world of explicit knowledge and a tendency to be overtly individual? That means to avoid being social. Now, this is a question that has been, on my mind, and I've wondered if it becomes a natural proposition at some point in time to actually to be in a culture where you're so intuitive that you will automatically move towards being social. And we will test it out in our in our slides ahead. Let me now take you through a very nice set of slides. To me, these are really nice, uh, because I will first show you three sets of two or three sets of products which have been built under the product ecology that I've been talking about. This is a terracotta double walled cooling water jar, and you have this tiger mouth, which is like I said earlier, it is like the affordance. When you look at the tiger mouth, you know that water is going to come out of there. You tilt and the water will come out of that. What is the connection between a tiger and us drinking water? Nothing. But it is just our way of honoring the fact that we know we live with animals, and we have to show a certain amount of respect for the non-human. And we know tigers drink water, and so we can just imagine that that becomes the spout. Now, this is a beautiful pot. It does not require any big maintenance. You keep it in the corner of your house for years together, and you drink cold water. But more importantly, you will find these pots under the banyan tree, on highways, on roadways, for the traveler to quench his thirst. And there will always be someone from the village who will go and fill it up. This is the lota, the ubiquitous lota from across the country, one of the best formed products anywhere in the world at any given point in time, is what Charles Eames had said. He was absolutely fascinated with the lota because when you hold the lota around his neck, it will never hurt your finger. It is this perfect ergonomics. Ergonomics is the the quantitative, measurable proposition through which you make sure that a product has the right proportion to fit into your hands or arms or whatever it is that the product, wherever that the whatever it, whichever part of the body that your product is supposed to come in touch with. So if it's a chair, then it has to be comfortable for your back, etc. So the lota, Eames had said, is one of the most perfect product because A, it is very, very comfortable to hold. B, it can come in different sizes. C, it can serve various functions. You can take it in your hand and you can pour water into your mouth, and it will remain, it will not be contaminated with your saliva. You will not even need a glass. And the distance is quite a lot, so you know that it's quite safe, hygienic distance. Um, and of course, when you make it out of copper, you know that you're storing water very well. I would like to show you a third product. We have the northeastern. No. So, okay. I would have liked showing you a product from the northeast, these bamboo products, but I was not able to get. I have a very nice product at home, very old, but I couldn't take a good picture. And I didn't find one on the, to be able to take. Anyway, so I've shown you two product ecology systems. The product ecology system applied to products tangible products meant for daily household usage. This is an architectural space, a built space, a step well from Rajasthan. Absolutely fascinating to look at. These were wells which were meant for the community, and the engineering of the well was such that it would store the maximum amount of water possible, because you know that Rajasthan is a very arid area. The engineering of the step well was also such that a maximum number of people could actually come and pick up water. And the aesthetics, it did not end with the functional properties of the well having high quality of maintenance and engineering, natural maintenance and engineering. The well was invested with very high level of beauty and aesthetics and ergonomics. So when you came to the well, you were in no hurry to get back. The well became a place to bond. The well became a place to be social, to exchange thoughts, sad, happy thoughts about birth, exchange notes about birth, death, marriage, etc. And it would go beyond the functional purpose of collecting water and drinking water. Uh, I would now like to show you two visual messaging systems. One is the Warli system, where what the Warli system goes back to actually experts in Warli say to 10,000 years ago of continuous presence of this particular tribal art. It is practiced by tribals very close to Bombay, actually, in a place called Dahanu. And they use monochrome to draw what they do. They do it with a very high level of abstract graphical sense, where they use the triangle to show a tree and mountain. They use the circle to show sun and moon and nature. They show a combination of a triangle and a circle, and then they use the square to show the chalk cut, the space of land around which all this activity is happening, or inside which these activities are happening. This is not painting for painting's sake, as we have already mentioned with regard to rock carving. This everything that is drawn for a specific purpose. It is either to show the season of harvest, or to show some celebration, etc., etc. And this very high level of graphical ability to express messaging, where it ends up looking so beautiful that it's a piece of art. Whereas within the community, art and design are inseparable, so the messaging is inseparable from the beauty of it. And this could only have been conducted within a product ecology slow time system. I would like to now show you Charmini Roy from Shantiniketan. The reason I have shown Jamini Roy here is to show this very, very high level of abstraction. We credit Picasso with cubism, with abstraction. We also credit a few other movements with abstraction. But no one talks about Jamini Roy, because you look at this, you look at the cats, you look at the eyes, you look at the woman with child. Jamini Roy was located in Shantiniketan. My mother's family was part of the families that worked with Rabindranath Tagore and Abanindranath Tagore to build Shantiniketan. And there was personal connection with Jamini Roy and his daughter Jamuna Sen, who was a very renowned batik painter, and she once did a sari for me when she was 84 years old. And when I wore that sari, someone asked, "Where did you get this sari from?" And I said, "Well, it was painted by someone called Jamuna Sen, Jamini Roy's daughter." And that person who happened to know about batik said, "Do you know it is impossible to get this brown cracking color that you have? You do not, you're, unless you are a master craftsman, you will not get this color." And of course, the sari is signed by Jamuna Sen. The reason I have portrayed Jamini Roy, apart from the fact of his very high level of graphicalized style through which he's able to show function and symbolism, is because Jamini Roy had the guts to actually defy classical tradition and go beyond that to form his own sense of avant-garde. I would now like to show you. So I've taken you through products, I've taken you through built environment, I've taken you through visual messaging systems. I would now like to take you to performative arts. This is the Yakshagana from Karnataka, southern Karnataka, and also overflowing into northern Kerala, where in a combination of scripts, singing, lyrics, of course, stagecraft, costume, and sound system, that is natural sound system. Performances are held from dawn to dusk, uh, based on, with thematics from the epics, Ramayana, Mahabharata, but also from Jain, literature, and all kinds of Indian traditions. And the idea here is to actually, through this very grand level of performative arts, be able to communicate values. And this would be akin to, for example, the Jatra that is held in Bengal. And they always have very large turnout of people, because it's a joy to watch these, and also they talk to you. So the performer and the watcher, the observer, sometimes become one. The stage is also such that you can see the actors going in, coming out, changing, becoming other characters. So the Hanuman will become something else, and then something else will become something else. So it is a very it's a very alive, dynamic, transparent system, through which you are conveyed value systems, ethics of marriage, ethics of commerce, ethics of caregiving to the elderly, etc., in a very beautiful way, where you don't feel like you're being lectured. I would now like to take you to the final imagery of a set of banyan trees, and this lady Timaka, who is actually popularly called the Banyan Amma, because she herself went around planting 3,000 plus trees on highways. And it's astounding to maybe an outsider, someone from outside India, to think that a person of this age, or a person like this, has devoted a lifetime doing this. But for her, she is interwoven with nature, because she knows that the banyan tree in India is a complete tree of knowledge. It's a complete ecosystem. And you know that they have these air roots, and the banyan tree is a social space. Every village will have more than one banyan tree, but there'll be this one banyan tree which will be beautifully, we'll call it chatal in Bengali. You frame it enough so that many people can sit. Sometimes disputes are resolved under the banyan tree. Sometimes marriages are arranged under the banyan tree. Good news, bad news, a lot of things are done under the banyan tree. And so the banyan tree is like a great social space. It's cooling, it's pristine. You have a beautiful ecosystem of all kinds of birds and animals and all of that. So it is symbolically very powerful to do this. Now, let me take you through some of the questions. So far, I have raised questions with regard to the cognitive revolution. Now, I will raise two sets of questions with regard to the industrial age. The first set of questions is ours, and the second set of questions are questions that were raised by the thinkers of industrial age, who had concerns for design, and they were connected to design. They were either designers or they were design thinkers, connected to understanding, and absolutely sometimes committed to understanding how design has failed us, or most of the time we have raised the issue of whether design has failed us or whether design has succeeded in actually building, extending itself to building social spaces. Because if design ends up supporting just the whims of the individual, then you're actually investing a lot of resources per person, and it becomes a very elitist endeavor. And so, in terms of, as a marker of social design, if a design solution is not going to, extend the space around it to involve more than one user, to involve a community of user, then you know that social design has not taken root. And to that extent, since we are actually trying to understand social design, to that extent, that design for us is a something of redundancy or failure. So the first question we ask here is, did the machine age change something adversely, that is negatively, that we need to know? Because we you would know that India, countries like India, Turkey, Indonesia, South Africa, and several other countries, several other such countries, Egypt, which became emerging economies later on, power economies actually, were countries that completely skipped the Industrial Revolution and moved into the post Industrial Revolution, not out of choice, but ironically, these were countries which were colonized by those who were conducting the Industrial Revolution, who needed natural resources. And these were some of the countries from where natural resources were being taken out to feed their own machines. And not even for a moment did they think that we could actually pass on some of the benefits of the industrial age to our colonized countries. And why would they do that? So, anyway, uh, so it's important to remember that we skipped the machine age and we moved into the post-industrial age. In some sense, we also escaped the drudgery, but we also escaped some of the benefits of the industrial age. My second question would be, did Eurocentrism, and Eurocentrism means speaking exclusively from the point of view of continental Europe, and continental Europe means Europe and the United Kingdom. So, did Eurocentrism mask, that is, cover our knowledge of how the rest of the world, that is, countries such as entire continents, Africa, the Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, the entire eastern part of Asia, the indigenous parts of New Zealand, indigenous parts of Australia, entire South America, entire Central America, entire Eastern Europe, and you can imagine how many countries have the entire Middle East. Did these, so let me just reframe the question once again. Did Eurocentrism mask or cover our knowledge of how the rest of the world, that is, all these parts of the world, looked at everyday, life? And I mean, did Eurocentrism and did the European countries ever try to understand uh, how we did our designing, how we attended to our daily lives through problem solving, and how vis-a-vis that we carved out our own design principles? Or did Eurocentrism actually mask all of that information to the point where design history anywhere in the world today starts with arts and crafts? Did we not have design before that? Right? So that is a question that you will need to ask, because you would like to practice design, you would like to, for whatever reason that you're attending the course, for you design is of seminal value at the moment, and these are the questions that you need to ask. And if we don't ask, nobody else is going to ask for us. My third question: did the evolution of design from an extreme modernism bias to an extreme anti modernism, which means postmodernism bias, create design approaches, a set of design approaches that the West, as well as the rest of the world, had to deal with, and approaches that were made to look like they were of universal value, which means that they were of equal value to all cultures, instead of instead of if the West had carved out, if the West had posited, if the West had proposed these approaches, would it not have been better for them to say that these work for us, and therefore there are other approaches to design that work for you that we would like to understand? But that has never happened. These approaches have, which we are going to talk about in our next session, are user centric versus market centric, human centric versus technology or product centric, life centric, versus anthropocentric. These approaches, which part of these approaches apply to us and which part of these approaches do not apply to us, is a question that we need to ask, and we need to say that if they do not resonate with us, then we are under no compulsion to have to use them. Uh, and then I move on to, and of course, I say the question assumes importance because countries like India, Turkey, Egypt, Indonesia, many of the East European countries, South Africa, China, etc., that became emerging economies were actually at the receiving end of these design approaches until the West realized that they actually don't work in the way that we are trying to export these design approaches. And you will understand more when we come to these approaches. And therefore, you will be able in a better position to ask this particular set of questions at that point in time. But nonetheless, I have brought it up because when I discuss approaches in my next, you will realize what I was talking about. My fifth question: was design from the Eurocentric world ever interested in fashioning their solutions to the needs of users from non-Eurocentric world? And were the and also understand that technologies actually originated, most of the modern technologies originated in the West. So obviously their design solutions which were based on their need gaps were mapped onto their technologies, and when those were exported bodily into our economies, it would have been a struggle for us to actually adapt to those, because neither were those technologies suited to us, nor were the need gaps ours necessarily. So, just to give an example, there was once the a main car designer for Renault, the French car, which was actually in a tie up with Mahindra's. And he had come, a young ethnographer who had come to IDC at IIT to present. And the founder of IDC, Professor Natkani, who's today 85 plus, and our prayers for him that he lives a very long life. He had Professor Natkani. I mean, he went. This young guy went on and on about how people in Karnataka wear garish colors, and so does so and so and so and so does so and so. And then he's talking about our country to us in that tone, and he knows really nothing, because what he considers garish colors are not garish for us. They hold certain symbols and values, like green is a color of fertility, red is the color of, etc., etc. And he knows nothing about these, and he's making all kinds of judgments. So Professor Natkani gets up and says, okay, listen, can you start talking about what applies to our country, since you've come for a tie up to build cars for us? Can you please do that? And then, I mean, I found my voice after he did that, and I said that, do you have any intention to build a car seat, seat belt that helps the woman in India with the sari on to wear the seat belt without crushing her sari? And he didn't know what to say. So I said that that's a need gap. That's a very, very important need gap for the urban woman to be able to use the seat belt, because every time I wore a silk sari or a cotton sari to go somewhere nice, and I wore my seat belt, that was the end of my anchal. And he had no clue that this was a need gap. So and then, okay, um, I move on to my sixth and possibly my last question, which is that was the industrialized world, that is, was the West, cognitively aware that a lot of design requirements in cultures like ours are driven by social factors, such as purposes like community water distribution? So I do not like to use the word slums, because they are, some of the slums are beautifully kept. I mean, they have community water facilities, and they have to line up, and they have to, collect their water. And their need gap involves, the idea of water collection at a social level, which means those spaces have to be mediated in such a way that when they're all there, there is complete social harmony when they collect their daily water, instead of them having to fight and quarrel for it. Uh, we also have, for example, when there's cricket match in India, or there's a football match in Brazil, we don't like to sit in our own homes and watch. We like to be the neighbors. We'll all get together and decide where we are going to, in which house this time we will watch the cricket match, and everybody will gather, and then the owner of the house will make cups and cups of tea, and it'll be, and then there'll be dinner, and there'll be shared dinner, there'll be all kinds of things. Would you actually sit at home alone and be watching cricket? You would not. Now the point is there a television set with a certain kind of volume requirement, etc., that caters to these social purposes? In more in then there are these very big imperatives. Our weddings, like I said, are not just a wedding between two individuals with a few friends called in. our they're not private affairs. Our weddings are actually social affairs, where you know that this is the opportunity when everybody who has helped me is going to be invited for my daughter's wedding or for my son's wedding. And therefore, the space of the wedding, the different rituals in the service design, everything of such a big wedding needs to be done in such a way that cannot actually follow the service design of, let's say, a Western wedding. And there are so many other such another very important project which I will share with you later, where our schools that are municipal schools in cities, or rural schools in rural places, are so distressed for lack of facilities. And so was there ever a possibility that one built technology, such as mouse, etc., and screens, etc., which could be shared, so that with the same setup, children could actually sit and through shared media do their tasks, because it's not possible for schools to have individual systems. So if you ask these questions, you will not get any answers, because they've never really thought of these problems on account of the insularity of their cultures. Now, what I'm going to do is, these were questions that automatically come in our heads. Okay. Now, I will end the session by very, very quickly taking you through a set of design thinkers and designers from the West who have been troubled by the fact that the design paradigms, the design approaches in the West have skipped social design of, and for what reason, which is what they've tried to understand. I will take you through the earliest, which is arts and crafts, and you can almost hear William Morris of arts and crafts. Maybe can I just change the thing? Arts and crafts asking the question, uh, why does, when industrialization happened, and I mentioned in my talk earlier, and this is the reason why it was important for you to understand the evolution of design from all of these, from the Western cultures and from our own, so that you have a comparative basis to understand what applies to us and what does not. So at that point in time, when industrialization had set in, William Morris asked, why does craft have to separate from design, and the kind of design that is driven by machine, and why does the industrial processes, processes have to be driven by a division of labor, which is what Marx had named it, because a machine splits you up in the assembly line, and each one sits in front of a particular console, and the alienation that sets in cannot actually do good to the mental and behavioral makeup of the worker. In other words, how can we marry good industrialization, or the good qualities of industrialization, with good design, which means design for social goal? And this was a question that was echoed by John Ruskin, by Pugin, artist J.W. Turner, also Victor Papanek from the 70s, because he talked about human ecology. I'll talk about it under the next module. So my next question comes from Marx. So we're talking about William Morris, which was around the middle of 1800 to end 1800, and so also was Karl Marx, where he asked this simple question: why was design not catering to the need gaps of the ordinary people when the Industrial Revolution set in? And why wasn't there the idea that these designs that were being made had to actually be based in shared resource use and not individual resource use? And why were the products so expensive that they became inaccessible to the good design, became inaccessible to the common man? In other words, was modern design only for the rich and the fashionable, or for the overwhelmingly common man? And design wise, Marxism, of course, also advocated, you must understand that as a design media, this is important, that Marxism advocated something called the agitprop. Agitprop were these tools through which you displayed agitation, and you did propaganda, which means that all your social causes could be communicated through agitprop, basically street plays, theater, posters, graffiti, everything in social space. I now come to the third strand of thinking, very important strand of thinking, which now we've reached early 1900s. Okay, so around the early 1900s, like 1902 or so, there was a movement called Futurism, which had a profound influence on modernism and, of course, Bauhaus. So it was actually the first strands of thinking of Bauhaus had come from Futurism, and then it took about 20 years for Bauhaus itself to set itself up. And Futurism's founder, Felipe Marinetti, who actually drafted a beautiful manifesto, it's called the Manifesto of Futurism, he had asked, can the supreme magnificence of mechanical speed and the newly conceived materials of the machine age, and I mentioned to you that is glass, cement, and steel, can all of these and all the benefits of science and technology be used to benefit the social, the larger interest of the larger lot of mankind, and not just the elite individual? Futurism's interest, actually, interestingly, they also saw environment as a mass environment. It means that you do not do anything to the environment that will harm the environment, because you know that in the process a lot of people will get harmed. And they were actually talking about these path-breaking notions in the at the turn of the century, around 1902. So the other side of the coin of futurism, of course, was arts and crafts, where while futurism said that it is important to assimilate craft with design, but keeping technology alive, arts and crafts said that technology destroys, art and craft. Now we come to this movement called Dadaism, which came in between the First World War, 19, during the First World War, 1914 to 1918. Dada basically means Dada, which is this European word which means say yes to life and no to war and death. And Dadaism found its roots in the disturbing, the disturbing scenes of the death and what they call dross and detritus, all of these dead bodies floating, and people dying or people wounded and nobody to attend to them, because it was a world war and there were too many people who were suffering. And Dadaism said that never again should this happen, and asked this question: can art and design be mindful of the trash? And they called it, all that came out of this First World War, they called it trash and detritus, and said that such wholesale destruction that got generated, is there a possibility that art and design can contain it and give it new life and make these motives, these crushing destructive motives of war, keep them alive through your art, for people to understand that this should never be done again? And you can see the iron, which has, it's like Bhishma Pitamaha's seat, where he slept on a bed of nails. And this iron has that, it is like an iron that actually can't be used. And then you have Mona Lisa, and a reinterpretation of Da Vinci's Mona Lisa with, uh, with mustache and all that, and treating her to be a person who is from the opposite sex. And it was all intentionally done because these motives, as part of their works, were meant not to evade the, unpleasant memories and scenes, but to actually keep them alive. Suprematism was actually something very close to the idea of futurism. Its founder, Malevich, Kazimir Malevich, from Russia, he actually found. Russia is a very large country, right? So the eastern part of Russia is like us. It has these ice tundras and, very desolate and very culturally mediated. And Kazimir Malevich, uh, he was also an obsessive mathematician. So can you see the paintings? These are actually perfect mathematical propositions, the perfect circumstance, the perfect circumference, the perfect square. Through this and this kind of minimalism, he tried to say that this represents technology, and would it not be nice to actually marry the art of the East? And by that he meant the huge culturally mediated East Russia with the technology of the West. And of course, it was meant from the it was and he asked, can science not be used to uplift the social milieu through abstract art? We now come to the period when the Russian Revolution happens, which is 1917, and the Bolshevik Revolution, and the movement that came up was the Russian constructivists, and there were also the European constructivists, but the very powerful originators of constructivists were the Russians. And you can see here the I had talked about the Vasily Kandinsky's work at Bauhaus, where he had used diagonal lines because the constructivists asked this question, can art be used only for can art be used only if it is purposive and not as idle art, and can that art have the power to actually take on the quality of the machine and express, in the way the machine is very dynamic, can art actually take on those qualities and make the space dynamic? Why? Because the sufferings of people, because that would represent the sufferings of people. Because when you don't have suffering, according to constructivists, uh, when you don't show suffering and you only show beautiful storytelling, all that, they say it is bourgeoisie preoccupation. It means it is status quo. It means that you are ignoring the travails, the problems, the struggles of the common man. And therefore, if you're their chosen medias were posters and big outdoor posters, and said that the only way you can actually show struggle is through these vibrant diagonal lines. And you have the Kazimir Malevich. Um, Actually, this is one of them is Ed Lizitsky, and one of them is Kazimir Malevich's painting, where you have blood actually in the surface of what? What is that white surface? It's it. Sorry. The white supremacist, because he founded a movement called suprematists, and the white circle is represented by the supremacy of whatever, and then you have the blood of the triangle, which represents blood and struggle. So, and of course, that is communism, because Malevich, although Malevich came in earlier, but later on, his suprematism actually happened much earlier, and then he joined up with constructivists much later. His suprematist movement was, kind of ill-conceived around the time of the futurist movement. Then we come to the next important and one of the last systems of questioning, where cubism used the precedents laid by Malevich to reduce complex figurative art to very simple lines and cubes to portray the very essence of an idea. That means for the common man, he should not have to be an artist to express beautifully. If you give him a set of lines and squares, he should be able to express to that, because as a common man, I have too many things to do. I have to go to the factory, I have to work, I have to come back, I have to cook. I don't have the time to do art. But if I'm given a set of squares and lines, I might actually be able to express something through that. And so this was Picasso and Georges Braque and some of the advocates of cubism's way to actually make art into a medium for social expression. And Picasso used it very effectively to ask, should art act as a medium of social messaging? And if so, then should that art be confined within the drawing rooms of privileged people, like chamber arts? He advocated that that would be a tragedy, because art for the sake of art is perversion. Art is needs to be purposive. Art needs to be a messaging system, and it needs to be a public messaging system to be put out in the social sphere outdoors and made into very large canvases, so that the common man passing by would see art and understand what the messaging is. because a common man neither has the time to stop by and appreciate art, nor does he have the skills to appreciate art. And therefore, artists from the Cubism period, like Picasso, did not appreciate the idea of private art. And at some point in time, Picasso was also invited by Russia to become a member, a card holding member of the Communist Party, which he gladly did. So his commitment to social space, social design was actually quite strong. I would now come to minimalism. The good side of minimalism, as you can see, this sculpture on the right by an Italian called Brancusi, absolutely stunning work. Please go to Google and elsewhere and see some of Brancusi's works. This work, which is called Bird in Space, I can see that Brancusi has just done a simple two lines and made it into sculpture. And Brancusi was a very nice sculptor who did very, very minimal lines and use of very minimal use of metal. He used metal and sometimes wood to do his sculptures. And for him, that sculpture was always kept for public viewing. Brancusi's museum, there's a very beautiful small museum that is in the, in the courtyard of the Pompidou Museum in France, in Paris. And in there, that was Brancusi's workshop actually. And in there, he had actually collaborated with other social design artists like a Japanese American called Isamu Noguchi, or a dancer called Martha Graham. So these were people who actually tried to, bring in harmony through their works, bring in social harmony. Now I come to the point. So I've come to past the 1930s into 1940s. As you can see, Robert Rauschenberg's painting of white squares was a way of actually bringing in, it is part of minimalism, right? So it was a way of, capturing science, ideas of science and calculation onto a simple plane with no complexity, and with the idea that you could actually let the viewer come in and read it without difficulty. But the point of Rauschenberg's art, which was somewhere in the 30s, moved on into the 60s, where minimalism. So remember that modernism started with industrial revolution and arts and crafts, and then moved into Bauhaus, and then continued. And the pinnacle of modernism, where modernism actually participated in social design, was in the 1930s with New Deal movements, etc. And by the time it came to the 60s, it had become very, very arrogant and obsessed with straight lines and lines for the sake of it, material for the sake of it. It was obsessed with geometric regularities, and minimalism became its intellectual partner. At this point in time, the point of design itself had collapsed, because Kenneth Frampton, a very, very well known critic of, architecture and design, he was a faculty at architecture faculty at Columbia University in New York. He's written innumerable books, and he's an absolute master at how he shreds people to pieces. He was not afraid of anybody, where he said that modernism was no good to anybody because of its tyranny of the straight line and the brutalism of modernism. It was not serving any good, and certainly no social good. So he was somebody who had rejected modernism. And there were, I move on to those who actually tried to bring in a balm, like try to do something about this horrible geometric irregularity. Now, what I did not mention is that in minimalism, the idea of a product was such that it would be a product for its physical reality's sake only, devoid of any emotions, devoid of any intuition, and the only thing to be celebrated in that product would be the materials. Now, how will a human being use a product that is so completely devoid of intuition and emotion? Are we mechanistic? Are we material? Are we steel? Are we, iron ore? We are not any of that. We are human beings with our frailties, with our defects, with our celebrations, with our intuition. So this was something that was very quickly recognized. And one of the things that Andy Warhol did, which I mentioned to you last time, and one of the questions that he asked was that you know did we have to convert all of our you know with reference to modernism. His question was, why were we actually creating these cycles of consumerism where we made people buy, making them feel that they're inadequate if they did not buy. And he tried to parody that by making a set of paintings. He had very unique ways of painting also. So he parodied that by repeating an image. So, for example, when you go to the supermarket, you will find he did one painting with the famous Campbell soup can that he would just bring home, open and have. And Americans had become very mechanistic. They would not cook. They would just buy, frozen or canned products and eat. And he showed like endless number of soup cans like these squares and said that this is what our culture has got reduced to. Now, I would like to interject at this point with a very important intervention. Uh, yeah. So I think I will skip Milton Glaser. He was part of the pop art movement and he's drawn Bob Dylan here, which I think I'd shown you last time. Let's go to the next one. Let me see what is there. Uh, yeah, and of course, last time I ended my program with, with a quote by Sotsas. Now, Sotsas was took up the leadership of, opposing, moving away from modernism by bringing in colors, making spaces more organic, and bringing in colors from other cultures. And they said that postmodernists said that we can at least open up our doors. We are such an insular culture. Let's open up our doors and bring in other, inspiration from other cultures. There is also Robert Venturi in my next slide, who was a famous architect and who built this, children's museum. You can see images of children, and he did it like, like a candy land. He also this is how Las Vegas was built, and he had some words about Las Vegas. But Hafiz Contractor, he takes on this idiom and he tries to build dreams out of his architecture, and so he copies postmodernism in a very bad sort of way. But coming to something very important at this point, uh, move far away from the world of design was Rachel Carson, who came out with a book called Silent Spring in 1962. And just before that, the See Around, which was actually serialized by New York, the New Yorker, the New York Times. And it is through that people got to understand, where she asked the question, is it not possible for industries belching out pollutants into what? Into our into the common resources asset of mankind, which means into the seas, into the rivers, into the fields. To what end, to what amount of greed and profiteering will this kind of cycles of pollution will continue, to the point where we will be left with no clean water to drink, no clean air to breathe? And Rachel Carson made a very deep impact in the minds of industries and designer, because soon after Rachel Carson came what we call the Club of Rome, where that was an initiative taken up by an industrialist from Italy called Aurelio Pecci, who was one of the major shareholders of the Fiat car. And he brought together scholars, uh, scientists, economists, and others, and also 39 countries together in they all met in Rome, where they tried to understand how our Earth, which has finite resources, can continue in the reckless, modernist ways of, so-called development, because this is not going to last, and we have to halt it somehow. And so, with Rachel Carson and Limit to Growth, and of course Joseph Schumacher's book Small is Beautiful, in the 70s, there was this sharp turn towards green movement where finally design sobered up because design had actually become a distortion of itself. It was not doing any good, far less doing social good. And so, my last slide over here would be that at this point, there will be one slide before that, uh, at this point, did design's privileged position in the West make it indulgent and complacent by the end of modernism itself, but also by the end of postmodernism in the late 80s, early 90s. Postmodernism's excesses were also unbearable because they went they overdid their symbolism, they underdid the functionalism, they had no logic to their products. These products were overpriced. And overall, the question that a design thinker called Whiteley asks is, far from being the basis, and he makes a comment, far from being the basis of the solution to society's problems, uh, its market-led consumerism and market-led design became one of society's problems. So by early 90s, I end by saying that by early 90s, uh, Whiteley asks, why did design fast become a weapon of exclusivity, uh, which is the other end of social design, placing design far out of reach of large sections of the community and making design anything but social. So, as a sobering thought, uh, all these questions that we have asked are questions. Now, when I uh, present to you the questions that were asked by the advocates of their own design approaches and how they were troubled by the way their design approaches had moved towards non-social spaces, uh, it gives you food for thought in terms of what should be your priorities, what should be your notions of social design. Should you actually be borrowing concepts of social design from the West, which actually is today just about trying to understand what social design is, whereas you live in a culture where we don't even use the word social designing because we do social designing in our DNA. And so it would be unwise to look to the West for principles of social design. You should actually take up the leadership of social design, and that is what a lot of the young and a lot of others today, and we have been doing it for a very long time. When the social design module starts next week, you'll see I'll give all these different models through which you'll see that most of the social design initiatives have actually come from the cognitive revolution part of the world. Now, I would like to end with this, like I did last time, with a little quote from Sorzas of postmodern, where he showed this beautiful school he had done. I would like to end with one of ours. I would like to end with uh, uh, Sir B.V. Doshi. I know him personally, Balakrishna Doshi, who recently, about 5 years ago, received what is called the Pritzker Award, which is the equivalent of the Nobel Award for architecture. And of course, it should have been given to him a whole lot earlier, but this is the Eurocentrism, which prevents them from overcoming their biases. But let me show you this particular project of Doshi sir. It's called the Hussein Doshi Gumfa in Ahmedabad, in a very green space, full of trees, full of neem trees. The he the references for actually the Doshi, the Gufa, the Hussein Doshi Gufa was a collaborative effort between Doshi and MF Hussein, as in, and it was meant to be an art gallery. And the reference for the Gufa, the cave, are elemental and primeval. The cave, the circle, the mountain, the undulations that you see, which are likened to the breast, which is actually the symbol of fertility and nourishment. and the historical precedents in India itself, which emerge from these universal prototypes, which in this case is the Buddhist stupa or memorial, and he also takes inspiration from the cave monasteries of Karli and Ajanta in particular. So the stupa as the primary reference has a dual significance as both the tomb of Buddha as well as the symbol of the pursuit of knowledge. But even more interestingly, I learned from Doshi's own words that the stupa actually uh, is has a community rather than individual reference, and therefore he had used the stupa. Further on, he says that the uh, uh, he talks about the life cycle of destruction and creation, death and birth, which of course is part of Buddhist philosophy. And as Buddhism became more entrenched and powerful in India, the stupa form evolved with the growth of religion. It came to symbolize all of these values. But the most striking part of this that never fails to move me is that when Roshi sir had started building this, this this cave, this design, he he writes this in his autobiography, and he calls it the revelation, where Doshi weaves a complex network of sources of inspiration, including a grove of neem trees. These are all neem trees, which he mentions as being described in the Ayurveda as a wonder tree, which we all know, a vision of interconnected tortoises. And we know that the tortoise, which is one of our avatars, is one of the oldest creatures. It's one of the longest surviving creatures. It is also our origin because the tortoise comes from water and comes to land, and we were once tortoise ourselves. And in this vision of interconnected tortoises with different sizes, when he first started building in this land, when he walked on the land, he could actually hear the whispers of the trees. And he by no means wanted any of the trees to be touched. He knew that the neem was trying to tell him something. He walked on the land, he felt the land, and he felt that he needed to build it in such a way that the land underneath also found some sort of agency. And so the guha actually goes to, symbolize a product ecology of the highest order. And I end with that just to say that uh, the whole discussion about design has has brought up parallel models of design understanding, and you can now start reflecting on where you stand vis-a-vis here. Where do you want to get your inspirations from, and how do you want to be actually your own maker of design, because you realize that you are standing in a very potential spot where you know the way to design much better than anybody in the West can come and actually tell you. So, this for me was a central point of the provocations. We are actually going to send you, Manish Arora will also tell you, we are going to send you a template in which these assignments are going to be, it'll be easy for you to do these assignments. Manish, why don't you tell them in Hindi? And the assignment for today, Manish, you could tell them is to choose any two questions of provocations that they were most provoked by from the cognitive model and two from the industrial model. They are free to choose more, but they should choose at least two. And if possible, to tell us why they chose what they did. That's today's assignment.
थैंक यू मैम। जैसा कि मैम ने आज बहुत अच्छे से कॉग्निटिव डिजाइन और प्रोवोकेशंस के बारे में सीरीज से हम लोगों को चीजें बताएं, और जिसके अंदर आर्ट, डिजाइन, एस्थेटिक्स, इन सारी चीजों को बहुत अच्छे से इनबिल्ड किया। और मैडम आपका फिर से बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। बहुत ही अच्छा और बिल्कुल मेंटरिंग सेशन था, सभी लोगों को बहुत अच्छा लगा। और मैडम ने जैसे कहा है कि 2 असाइनमेंट्स आपको दिए जाएंगे, प्रोवोकेशन से रिलेटेड और कॉग्निटिव
Actually, there are
डिजाइन से।
four. There is
या
today's
टू फॉर
assignment.
या ओके
Today's assignment, then one assignment where they choose one or two artifacts from their own home or from anywhere else, which is traditional, but in full use, full complete use. It can just be the cutter, what we say, boti in Bengali, or it can be the masala thing, or it can be the idli thing, whatever. But it should be a product which is traditional, but in complete use with true
या
satisfaction. That's the second assignment, and the other two assignments are also there. We will put them down and we'll send, right, Manish? So it'll be easy for them,
बिल्कुल।
and you can explain to them the
आप
template then.
मुझे शाम तक या रात तक असाइनमेंट्स दे दीजिएगा, मैं कल बच्चों को वो सारी चीजें प्रोवाइड करा दूंगा। और सभी पार्टिसिपेंट से रिक्वेस्ट है कि कल कम से कम दोपहर 2 बजे तक इंतजार करें। आज के इस फीडबैक फॉर्म, अटेंडेंस और जो भी मैडम ने असाइनमेंट्स दिए, इनकी डिटेल्स बना के आपको प्रोवाइड करा दी जाएगी।
और
और
मनीष,
अगर
जो
जी
टेम्पलेट जो है उसमें वो लोग पिक्चर्स आसान से अपलोड कर पाएंगे, राइटिंग कर पाएंगे, तो सभी वो जो फॉर्मेट है, तो एक टेम्पलेट है जो कि सबका सब सॉल्यूशंस जो भी आएंगे तो एक तरह से हम वो स्टैंडर्डाइज्ड होंगे, तो हमारे लिए भी
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल
पढ़ना आसान होगी. And we would like to also tell them that, you know, please put in your heart into these assignments, because we would like to actually collate, and we would like to put them out in, in a space called DSource, which is also part of the Ministry of Education, and which is run by us at IIT Bombay, which actually has millions of viewers. Manish, did you know we won the YouTube Silver Award for having
या
million plus viewings,
यस
etc. So
यस यस आई
हम
नो इट।
वहाँ पे ये असाइनमेंट सब क्यूरेट करके वहाँ पे हम डाल
कोई
सकते हैं.
प्रॉब्लम नहीं, कोई प्रॉब्लम, मैं उसकी भी डिटेल्स इसी के साथ दे दूंगा,
एंड
बच्चों
दे
को
कैन
इजी
कम
रहेगा
बैक
उस।
टू यू. हाँ,
हाँ
उनको अगर कुछ एक्सप्लेनेशन चाहिए तो आपसे आराम से पूछ
बिल्कुल
सकते
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल। और अगर किसी बच्चे को कोई प्रॉब्लम होगी तो वो हिंदी में हाथ से लिख के उसकी इमेज खींच के
हैं.
उसमें
बिल्कुल
सबमिट कर देगा।
बिल्कुल
समटाइम्स
बिल्कुल.
किसी को प्रॉब्लम होती है,
नो
बाकी कोई
प्रॉब्लम.
दिक्कत नहीं। ठीक
कोई
है मैम,
दिक्कत.
आप आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद और सभी पार्टिसिपेंट्स का भी बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद इस बहुमूल्य लेक्चर को सुनने के लिए। और उम्मीद है कि इससे कुछ सीखे होंगे। अब हम लोग थर्सडे को शाम 4 बजे फिर मिलेंगे। मैम की नेक्स्ट क्लास होगी इसी के एक्सटेंशन में। आप सभी का
करेक्ट.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। अपना ध्यान रखिए और सुरक्षित रहिए।
Thank you, everybody.
थैंक यू
Thank
मैम।
you for
थैंक
attending. Thank you, Manish. Bye. You